Welcome to the podcast of USASOA Beyond the Battlefield, where we shine a light on service, sacrifice, and solutions. Today's host is John Yory, president of USASOA. Today, we're honored to welcome an American trailblazer, the nation's first Iraq War veteran elected to the U.S. Congress, a Bronze Star recipient for his service in Iraq with the 82nd Airborne Division. His dedication to public service did not end on the battlefield. After representing Pennsylvania's 8th Congressional District, he went on to serve as the 32nd Undersecretary of the Army, where he was responsible for leading more than 1 million soldiers and civilians. Join us in welcoming a leader who has dedicated his life to serving our country, Undersecretary Patrick J. Murphy. Welcome, sir.
Mr. Secretary, I refer to you that way. Again, we want to thank you.
John, you call me Patrick. We're friends, but
I'll call you Patrick. Great. And that goes to who you are. Thank you for that, sir. Thank you. Before we dive in, could you share what inspired your commitment to veterans and military families as it relates to your service in the military, but also as a member of Congress?
Sure. I grew up in a row house in Northeast Philadelphia. I had great parents, but the two previous generations served in the military. My mother served in our church. She was a Catholic nun. Luckily for me, she left the convent and met a Navy man, Jack Murphy. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. But I'm a third generation veteran. But they instilled in my brother, sister, and I the values of hard work, of giving back to our community and our country, and living what the Bible says, and that's having a servant's heart. And giving back when you can. And so for me, it was really natural to join the military at age 19. I earned my way to become an Army officer through ROTC. I was a hockey player in college at a small Catholic Division III school called King's College. It's in Wilkes-Barre, PA, but earned my commission as a second lieutenant that way. And then was blessed enough to eventually, the Army, sent me off to airborne school and air assault school and eventually law school. Then I went and became a professor at West Point. And I was there, though, John, when 9/11 happened. And, I had loved ones that I knew that were murdered that day on 9/11. And I went to my commander's office and said, "Hey, sir, you put me through all this training. I was getting ready for Ranger School at the time." And I said, "But I got to get in a fight." And, soon after I did deploy under General Petraeus and then Colonel Mark Milley. And then came back from that first deployment after 9/11, and then was part of the 82nd Airborne Division, where it was the invasion force in Iraq, and served with the 2nd Brigade Combat Team of the 82nd Airborne. And I led a Bolt team there and 7 paratroopers. And it was intense, but it was one of the best jobs I ever had. I served in the company heroes. Unfortunately, seeing 19 of my brothers who never made it home, and then even my brothers and sisters who made it home, some of them aren't with us anymore, but that really instilled in me that the confidence and a desire to move forward and drive on and eventually go into political public service.
Thank you for that, sir. Appreciate it. And again, thank you for your service, both in uniform and Congress, and to the community at large, to your congressional district, but also to the American public as well. And that kind of, as you were talking, it kind of leads me into asking you, when you look back at your time in Congress, what were some of the most impactful bipartisan efforts that you saw that supported service members?
Yeah, it's like I used to teach the cadets at West Point. I used to teach firsties there, right? Leaders solve problems. And so when I was in Congress, a major problem was unemployment. In our generation of Iraq, Afghanistan veterans, at that point, when I won in 2006, there was a 16% unemployment with our brother and sister post 9/11 veterans. So working with Republicans to pass the post 9/11 GI Bill, which then President Bush signed into law. I was just at the Bush Library the other day on 9/11, anniversary of 9/11. I was honored that he asked me to go speak, to other veteran leaders who were in town for that, solemn day. And talking about how right now there's about 800,000 young Americans today using the post 9/11 GI Bill. I mean, that was a bipartisan bill that was signed by President Bush that I co-authored, that I was really, really proud of. So John, I would say that that was a game changer. And you got to remember, the original GI Bill in World War II, after World War II, a lot of folks thought veterans were like, oh, well, they're not going to be able to cut it, and they're not college material, they're combat veterans. Our generation, that generation did phenomenal. They made the honor rolls, the dean's list of those colleges. But our generation, our average veteran right now using the GI Bill has a 3.1 GPA, which is about 3 points higher, 0.2, 3 points higher than civilians, right? And they're more likely to major in STEM and business. So I say all that because the years solved problems. That was a problem we solved. It. There's other issues like the repeal of Donors Hotel and other things that we passed in a bipartisan nature that I'd be more than happy to chat about as well. But to me, giving people the gateway, the opportunity to live the American dream, and I get it, college isn't for everyone, but if you want to go and earn your college degree and you served Uncle Sam honorably, you deserve that chance.
Thank you. While representing Pennsylvania in the U.S. Congress, it's undeniable you were a driving force behind some major legislation that includes, again, the 21st century GI Bill, also the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. We remember that as well. But my question is, was there additional legislation for veterans that just didn't get the traction? This includes service members that just didn't get the traction it deserved.
Yeah, listen, now I'm in business, right? So I'm not in political public service any longer. I've been in business now for several years. I teach at the Wharton Business School. I work for a great company called Hilco Global. And I'm passionate about our other entrepreneurs or other veteran entrepreneurs. So a piece of legislation that we tried to pass, I co-sponsored it, it didn't get through, was, we have in the federal sector, the two largest federal agencies, John, are the Department of Defense and the VA. We should make sure that they have goals. They have frankly set asides for women-owned businesses, African American-owned businesses, et cetera. But they only have goals for veteran-owned businesses, right? Especially in those two departments. We should make sure that we give veteran business owners a chance to go back and help serve their brother and sister veterans. I don't think it should just be a goal. I think it should be a mandate. Again, we're talking about 2-3%. But that should be the minimum, and unless Congress pass it, they'll just pay a lip service. And for me, I see too many of these contracts go to the big primes out there when devoted, successful, young veterans who have built incredible businesses. Veterans like Blake Hall, who started ID Me, that is in 14 federal agencies right now, that have helped hundreds, actually millions of folks secure their own data. He's an Army veteran, Iraq, Afghanistan veteran, again, decorated in combat, has come back and built a company called ID Me that's now worth over $2.5 billion. Those are the folks, John, we got to give a chance, a shot to live the American dream and let them serve the brother and sister veterans in the federal government.
Absolutely right. 100%. We agree completely. That's so much needed now these days. Especially these days, what we have to discuss also is navigating the political divide. It's a reality that we all have to recognize, but also find solutions, through hope and unity. So that kind of leads me to what I want to ask you also is how do we keep veteran support above that political fray while recognizing, the reality of the situation in which we currently live?
Yeah, America is more politicized and partisan than ever, John. And I think my background, I was independent most of my life. Our military has to remain apolitical. It is the most well-respected organization in America, but we have to keep it that way by keeping it apolitical. So that means if we have whoever the commander-in-chief is, if they're seeing troops, they should be selling partisan hats and merchandise
right
on military bases, right? It just there's no place for that, right? So again, I know when I joined in 19, I had a captain that told me and my fellow cadets, "Hey guys, gals, like, do not." My advice to you is to register as an independent, so you're not partisan. So people ask you can just say you're independent, so you don't get ever pulled down in that fray. And that's what I did. And that's why I was independent most of my life. So for me, John, we got to make sure we do that. We also, though, doesn't mean we sit in the sidelines. We need our veterans to vote. In a lot of states, I'm going to be, at the University of Pennsylvania this week with Veterans for All Voters, with my brother and sister veterans saying, why are veterans shut out from the political process? Do you know veterans, hundreds of thousands of veterans in Pennsylvania and a dozen other states can't vote in primary elections? Why? Because they're not registered Democrat or Republican, so they can't vote in primaries. If you're a veteran or if you're an independent, you should be able to vote in a Democratic primary or the Republican primary. Now, again, if you're a Democrat, you shouldn't be able to vote in Republican or vice versa. But if you're an independent, if you're an American veteran that served our country, you should absolutely be able to vote. So I'm standing with my brothers and sisters, Veteran for All Voters, making sure that we push the envelope, let people know, do not shut out our brothers and sister veterans out from the political process. Secondly, John, we need veterans to stand up and run for office, whether Democrat, Republican, Independent. I was blessed in that, I ran for Congress. I won. I was outspent by over $3 million because, I'm a blue collar kid from a row house in Philadelphia. And I'm blessed, right? But I was one of the least wealthy members of Congress because it's really a rich person's game, right? And most freshmen are in their 50s. I was 33. But I say that because of the infrastructure. We ask these great young men and women that, our brothers and sisters to go serve. They're out there at the country clubs. They're out there making, connections with business leaders and donors, right? They're out there doing God's work for our military, putting their lives on the line. So when they come in, I advise a lot of veterans to run. It used to be, John, after World War II, 80% of our Congress was made up of veterans.
Right.
Our forefathers, the signers of the Declaration, majority of them were veterans. George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, etc. Our generation now, though, John, it is bad. I did a Substack. It was called The Disappearing Voice of the American Veteran. And it showed how only 18% of our federal elected officials are veterans. Of the 600,000 elected positions across America, the local elections, it's less than 8%. We got to do a better job. And again, to do it in a way that, unifies America, that isn't, it's really easy to talk about why the other person should be fired. You got to talk about why you should be hired, and try and unify our country when it is so divided and see the humanity in each other.
That's fantastic. I think it might lead into my next question. What advice would you give to current lawmakers, basically on both sides of the aisle? With all that being said, what advice would you give to them if they're listening right now?
I would say to them, listen, if you can't say one or two good things about the other party that you're working with them on or they have done, then you're wrong, right? Listen, I'm a proud Democrat, but the reality of it is Donald Trump did a lot of great things in his first term. He did things such as the Abraham Accords, Middle East, very positive. Operation Warp Speed saved tens of millions of lives. And so I did a Substack on this, a column on this the other day saying maybe Donald Trump should have gotten the Nobel Peace Prize. He helped push this thing to support tens of millions of lives being saved across the world, including in America. But and so for me, as a Democrat, you got to point the positive stuff out there. And just like the Republicans got to point out good things that Barack Obama did, like bring bin Laden to justice, which was a pretty courageous act, getting those Navy SEALs there in the border of Pakistan and taking them out, after he murdered thousands of innocent Americans on 9/11, right? So when you look at that, I think as Americans, we have to be part of the solution. I challenge all of my brothers and sisters out there. What are you doing to show humanity, to basically say, hey, I might be Democrat, I might be Republican, but the other side has good ideas too. Don't be so arrogant that one side has all the problems. In fact, I think most of the problems, the outside world, other countries, especially our enemies, they're trying to divide us from within. I think half the time the battle isn't between Democrat and Republican. I think it's folks out there that are trying to divide us, and too many of us are going around like lemmings, just saying talking points instead of standing on 2 feet as an American and saying what's best for our country and what's best for our community.
I think, it leads you to what you often hear these days too from from basically both sides of the aisle as well is, we really do have to place country over party. And there's a place for that. There's a place for the political aspect of our parties, our differences, can be robust. debates and communication can get lively. And I think that's what the founders, if we look back at our history, have done. And but we manage at the end of the day to come together. Okay, I lost, you won. But there's also common ground. And as to what you were just saying, we do have to find a way to come back to that common ground, because I think in earnest, all Americans truly want that. They really want us to work together, everyone to work together. They don't like the division, it turns them off. And the more that the American people are turned off, they're no longer engaging in their government. And it's a government of the people, for the people, and by the people.
That's right.
That's exactly where we need to, focus on that center instead of the extreme sides again.
Yeah, and listen, I'm a Democrat that's on Fox News, right? I'll be on there later today. And the reality of it is, united we stand, divided we'll fall. And, we need Democrats to go on Fox News. We need Republicans to go on MSNBC, right? And when we say that, we also have to point out the fact that, if you have someone who's especially a veteran that you believe in, even if they're a different party, are you amplifying? Are you following them? Are you amplifying them? Saying, hey, this is what right looks like, right? This is a person that's going to stand up to their own party. That's going to show, John, that moral courage that we know at our core is missing in Washington, D.C. right now. And that's why in the States, I'm so hopeful. I look at leaders like Wes Moore, he's the governor of Maryland, 82nd Airborne Division, alumni, combat veteran, right? So, they're the type of folks that give me hope out there that I've supported and I'll continue to support.
Exactly. I think that really leads us into a segue into what we see as health, housing, and hope. Quite honestly, it's, we talk about veteran homelessness, mental health, access to care. All these still remain a challenge. What innovative solutions have you seen or would you propose to meet these specific challenges that veterans, including their families, face just about every day?
Yeah, listen, I'm a numbers guy, right? I speak from my head and my heart. I'm gonna give you the numbers because they're not good. 32,000 veterans are homeless right now. 32,000. We got to do a better job, right? And it's not a whole government approach, not just, we need a whole nation approach. 120,000 have taken their own life by suicide since 9/11 of our fellow brothers through veterans. 120,000, right? So I say those two numbers. How is it that when we have, in San Francisco, a great, meeting with the Chinese president, they clean up that city, they get rid of the homeless encampments, et cetera, or they do the UN thing in New York City, or they do wherever they are, right? When they want to shine or do a spotlight, people come to attention and work at it, right? But then the other 364 days a year, they forget about our brothers and sisters, right? We got to do a better job with a whole nation approach to take care of our veterans. A lot of them that are homeless specifically do have mental issues, and I get it, right? And so it's not just about giving them a house, make sure that we give them the treatment that they've earned and stuff like that. But, looking the other way or just sweeping under the rug, we should not have tolerance for that. We got to do a better job and demand more for brothers and sisters and live that ethic, John, that I know you live by, that we leave no one behind.
I 100% agree. And that's our organization as well. All of our programs and services are rooted in grassroots programs and services. And people ask, what does that mean? Well, what it means is that we go into the streets, which we have been doing for years. We've been a nonprofit for 13 years. And since the very beginning, we decided we have to go meet veteran service members or families where they are. If they're on the street, we go to the street. We initiated one program called Soup and Sandwich Saturdays. So we get together in our office. There's a kitchenette, and we have been doing that for years. And we get everyone wants to join in because it's a hands-on experience to know exactly that you are engaging, a veteran, a service member, their family member, where they live in their life, so that we can more better align them to say, okay, well, okay, I'm a veteran, you're a civilian. They can see the life of a veteran more closely, more upfront, and understand more personally what they're going through and how the civilian world, all of us, can get together and rectify the situation, find solutions, even if it's making sandwiches, making soup. The ladies at my church here in Accokeep, we're just outside of Washington, D.C., They get together every Saturday at the church parish hall, and they make the soup and we take it out, or we make sandwiches. So we're engaged in that aspect to be able to talk to these veterans who are enduring mental illness, who are enduring addiction. But the longer you are on the street, the worse it becomes for the individual. You lose your sense of self-worth. You lose that sense of dignity that God gives all of us. And we have to be able to find a way to say, we're out there, we care about you, we're here not only to feed you food, but also to see what else we can do. Previous administration, we had what was called an app, a Square app, that all I needed, or our organization needed, was the last four digits of the veteran's social security number. We could plug it into the app, immediately find what that veteran was qualified for healthcare, mental health care, physical health care, whatever it was, and we took them directly to the ER at the VA hospital.
Yeah.
You can't get any more grassroots.
Yeah.
That's how we solve our problems, by engaging the general public and not shifting all the weight over to the VA or to the government, because we are supposedly the government. So we do have a civic duty and responsibility to stand up, as well, as you were saying, to say, yes, we also have to do it. We have to contribute. If you can contribute $10, we have a $4.99 a month on our homepage. Donate $4.99 to buy a sandwich for a homeless vet. That's it. And we can turn that $5 into 2 sandwiches.
Right.
And even soup. So, but it's the McDonald's theory. You sell a hamburger for $1, but you're selling 1 million of them. So if we get that kind of in our head, that unified together, we can solve the most serious challenges, issues that are facing our military, that are facing our veterans, especially our most vulnerable. We serve Access Housing, which isn't far from us, here in Southeast DC. And they house probably around 70 or so elderly veterans who, if they did not have that facility, would clearly be on the street. These are guys in wheelchairs and walkers. They're sick, and we go every Saturday or Sunday. We provide, last week on Sunday, we did a spaghetti and meatball dinner for them, and we engage people to come with us, and to support efforts like this. So everything you're saying is exactly, I feel the compassion from you and the passion, and this is what we need to excite back into the civilian world.
Yeah, John, and it's like the Bible says, having a servant's heart, right? And so that's why I get ticked off when people think, well, it's the VAs. No, it's not. It's a whole nation approach. We need these public-private sector relationships, programs, initiatives that are out there where the rubber meets the road, like you are, like the soldiers and sailors of America are doing every day, doing the soups and sandwiches, making sure that they're getting fed, making sure they have dignity, and we treat our brother and sister veterans, even if they're homeless, with the dignity and respect that they have earned. And we got to do a better job as a nation. We got to do a better job as veterans. And that's why I'm proud to be on here with you and support you every way I can, my friend.
I appreciate that. I think we've touched on this before. I want to talk for a little bit about transition and employment. What more can be done to support service members that are transitioning now into civilian life, especially in employment, but in education? And you've also touched on entrepreneurship. I see so many veterans now that are veterans, people that are transitioning, especially after 20 years, they're having a difficult time now finding work. But there are corporations and businesses that do have a section set off to basically look for veterans that would be a good fit for their company. But more importantly, what would your suggestion be to these veterans, especially in the way of employment, education, and entrepreneurship? We forget about that, don't we?
Yeah, we do. John, I think it's easy. I think, every year there's about 200,000 veterans and military spouses who transition every year. The numbers, again, are not good. The numbers are about 24% of military spouses are unemployed. Why should we care about that? These are military spouses who are looking for work and can't find a job, right? 24%, that's 4x on what the unemployment rate is. I'm sorry, it's 6x on what the unemployment rate is, right? So, in civilian capacity. So why is that? The military families are like American families. Most American families are dual income families. We're getting a shaft as far as military families in that, 24% unemployment rate. I talk about this from a personal level. I've been working since I was 9 years of age. But when I left the military, I was unemployed for about 4 months. And now I was waiting for the job I was interviewing and I didn't, apply for unemployment benefits, even though I earned them and all that stuff. But to me, it was personal. I still wore, a shirt and tie every day. I looked the part that I was trying to get the job that I wanted. But I had to work it, but it took longer than I anticipated, leaving Fort Bragg, North Carolina, going back home to Pennsylvania. So I say those things because we got to do a better job. And again, it's these public-private partnership, right? So I'm an ambassador for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. We do over 80 events a year. The majority of them are live in person, where we help veterans do their resume, get a LinkedIn headshot, work their LinkedIn better, and then we actually set them up with interviews with corporate America right there, right? And so for me, that's very important. Why? Because you got to bring them, here and make it easier, for them during that transition. We also do virtual events because, we go to the major posts, not necessarily the smaller ones. But we help out over 84,000 transitioning members every year, and it's incredibly important. So, what I would say to you is, if you're in corporate America like I am, like I've talked to my teammates here at Hilco Global, where I'm calling in from here in Times Square in Manhattan, and I'm talking to them about, hey, what about the Skill Bridge program where we can hire veterans for 3 months, as kind of a tryout for, on both sides. Those type of things I think are incredibly important. And the last thing I would say is, don't just be like, well, I'm not the hiring manager or whatever. Go talk to your hiring manager. Be like, hey, look up, hiringourheroes.org. When we do these events, can your company be there? It's free for them. It's free for veterans. Can they be there to talk about your company and see if there's a potential option out there to bring these great young Americans in? We got to do a better job. And again, leaders solve pain points. And I think it's a pain point that continues to go on that we have to do a better job at.
Absolutely, we do. Leaders do solve problems, and they engage the general public to put their hands on the situation as well. That's what we pride ourselves on doing, to showing people.
And by the way, but I think I forgot to give you that stat. Like I told you about the 24% unemployment rate of military spouses. 56% of veterans will be unemployed at some point during a transition. 56%, like I was at some point, right? And so, it was not easy for me. I just wrote a piece on this on my Substack because I don't talk about, my failures. I don't talk about my journey because, I was kind of embarrassed about it at the time, right? But, it affects everybody.
Right.
Even, you don't know the battles people are facing from the outside, that they're facing within. And so it was, part of it was my own, my head, et cetera. But, it worked out fine. Eventually got a great job. Eventually went to Congress. Eventually was in the Pentagon. But I still make sure that, I did that ethic that we leave no one behind, and too many of our brothers and sisters being left behind in corporate America. We got to do a better job at that.
Yeah, exactly right. While you were talking, it kind of led me into what I wanted to talk about, is how technology really is transforming outreach. If we look at it clearly, it's amazing. What role do you see for digital platforms, apps, podcasts like ours right now? How can that go a long way in shaping public awareness, but also policy and legislation?
Yeah, listen, I tell people, if you're not using social media, if you're not using LinkedIn, you're wrong. John, I teach this at the Wharton Business School. They pay a lot of money for these students. They pay a lot of money to go to this best business school in the world. It's the University of Pennsylvania. We make more billionaires than anybody. But I tell them, your network is your net worth. Your network is your net worth. Use LinkedIn before you need a job. Connect with people. If your listeners connect with me, Patrick J. Murphy, again, you don't have to send me a special note. Just connect with me as long as you have a headshot on there. I'll accept it. If you don't have a headshot, then, I don't know if you're a foreign person that's trying to, just get that from me. So I won't accept it then. But what I tell people is, use that. And then several things, always go left of boom. Like, don't wait till you're transitioning out and then look for a job, right? Do a 6, 12, 18-month plan. What geographic region do you and your family members want to live in? Is it your home of record? Is it somewhere else? What industries are there? What industries do you want to go into? Where do you want to kind of go in and make your next mark on a team? and what skills and attributes you need to show that you could bring to the table on day one. And really, it's not about college degrees anymore. It's really about, skills-based, certifications to show them that you could do the job. But I tell people, again, when we say your network is your net worth, use LinkedIn as a force multiplier, connect with people, do 5 a week, connect, and then connect with them and say, hey, any chance I could grab a cup of coffee with you? Don't ask for a job. Ask for advice. If you ask for advice, you might get a job. If you ask for a job, you're going to get advice, right? So, go and talk to people in that industry that, folks that you look up to, that you might be able to join their team. But go into it asking for advice. Secondly, ask for a one-on-one personal meeting. If you can't, try and do a Zoom. Zoom's better than just a phone call. If you can't do a Zoom, then yeah, do a phone call. But put yourself out there and understand that you're not going to bat, 900%, right? You're going to bat, it's not like a basketball, free throws in the NBA. It's more like Major League Baseball. You might hit 300, right? That means 7 out of 10 times you're going to get rejected, you're not getting an offer. But that's the grind you have to do, that if you plan your work and then work your plan, you will prove that you can get these jobs, a job that you want, and that these are going to be jobs that you'll stay with and not be a temporary gig.
That's amazing, because, it goes a long way in recognizing that technology, while at times it can seem distant and cold, it also can, as you said, lead to a deeper personal connection, but you have to make the effort in order to have that happen, to occur.
So John,
yeah.
the effort, but I get it. And people are like, well, I don't put myself out there. What if they say no? Okay, they don't accept your connection request. Before this interview, you and I have been friends, but I connected with you on LinkedIn, and I was like, and that's why before this, podcast, I was talking to you about, your work with the Coast Guard, right? And by the way, I'm a Philly guy. I live in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, but we go down the Jersey Shore, Cape May County. Well, Cape May County is where all the coasties go for basic training.
Right.
On weekends at the Wildwood Boardwalk, right? So again, those type of personal connections you make with somebody, and then it puts it at ease, so you're not just a face with a name.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? It's Patrick, I tell you, nowadays we do our best, I think, to try to bring people back together. And kind of with that sentiment, what gives you hope, or what hope can you give to our military families and even our veteran families for the future? What do you see?
Listen, there is still an abundance, a sea of goodwill out there, right? But don't drown. Keep swimming, right? You got to show that grit, that resiliency that you've shown in your time in the military, whether it's a troop or whether it's a family member, right? And so just get after it. And there's organizations like yours, like other ones. I just was with the CEO of Operation Homefront. I had him on my, I have a podcast myself, John, as you know, it's called Warrior Money. It's on Yahoo Finance, and people can check us out on wherever you get your podcast from. And I would say to you, I get folks like Alan Reyes, who again is a retired flag officer in the Navy, who's now the Operation Homefront CEO, where they really help, folks, especially when it comes to transitional housing, so they're not homeless, right? And so we had him on, and we were talking about things like, hey, if there's a government shutdown, what does that mean? And that means that military families aren't going to get paid probably, and that's 1.3 million military members. If we shut down the government coming up, when you don't get paid, most military families are like most American families. They're living paycheck to paycheck. Now, again, I try to lecture, that's why I teach at War Business School, but I even in my Yahoo Finance, Warrior Money show, I talk about, hey, follow Dave Ramsey. Like, you have 3 months, set aside in emergency funds. Now, again, 3 months of expenses, it's easier said than done, but it's stuff that we all got to do a better job with.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I kind of, this may also lead into what I think will be our closing reflection here. We always like to end our podcast with gratitude. Who in your life, past or present, embodies the spirit of service that we're fighting for? And do you have any final words for our viewers? And we always talk about veterans and service members, but if you could focus for a few minutes on civilians and talk to them about that situation.
Well, listen, I talked about my mother earlier. She was a Catholic nun. She's been a role model in my life, and she's been a hard worker. Was a legal secretary. Made sure my brother, sister, and I, were in a straight and narrow. To be honest with you, John, I think she's disappointed I'm not a parish priest. That I went in the army and then political public service. But she's always been, my big backer. She's tough though, but she's my backer, and obviously my father as well, Navy veteran, enlisted as well. On the civilian side, I mean, my best friend in the Army was my best friend in Congress. His name's Tom Rooney. He's Republican. I'm Democrat. We were in Congress. We worked on bills together. We're now both out of Congress. We work on business stuff together, venture capital. We invested over $250 million in over 200 mostly veteran-owned companies. But I would say to you, like, I get my inspiration with the people I deal with, John. And if I mentioned it in passing in the beginning, but as the final thought, sometimes in political public service, it's so divisive. And when I was in, I had young kids at the time. Now my oldest she's now in college at Clemson. She's doing Air Force ROTC. I'm incredibly proud of her. But, I would say to you, at that time, I wrote the bill, the Murphy Amendment, which repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Now, a lot of folks said to me, Patrick, like, why do you care about this? You're straight, a family man, devout Catholic, et cetera. I'm like, hey, man, we kicked out over 13,000 troops from service just because they were gay, just because of their orientation, not for misconduct. Whether you're gay or straight, any misconduct, we'll throw you out, right? But just because of who they loved. And, I had death threats at the time when I was in Congress, and, even my local paper editorialized against three people doing this hotel. Like, it wasn't a great time. And then my wife asked me, Patrick, is this all worth it? And that day, John, I had gotten an email from a captain in Kabul, Afghanistan, an Army captain. And he wrote me, he said, hey, sir, hope you don't mind me reaching out. One of your former students at West Point, had your personal email, and I got it. I read about you in today's Star Stripes newspaper about this Iraq war veteran in the fight to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell. He said, hey, sir, I'm on my 4th deployment here in Afghanistan. I'm here in Kabul because I'm company commander. It's the greatest job I ever had to lead these men and women. And he goes, but as well as I do, the worst thing you can get when you're deployed overseas is a Dear John or a Dear Jane letter. Because of the suicide rate in the military, et cetera, the SOP, the standard operating procedure is we get them, they get one of those, we get them with a battle buddy, we walk them to the chaplain's office, and then we talk to the commander. If there's child custody issues, we'll talk to the commander about potentially having to send them home, at least temporarily, to get it squared away. But he said, Congressman, never in a million years did I think I'd get one of those letters. And the person that I love with every fiber of my being just let me know that he's not going to be there when I get home. And it's breaking my heart.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm sitting here at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm looking at this letter. I'm holding my 9mm weapon. I'm thinking about blowing my brains out. He's like, but I've read about you this morning, and for some reason, it's giving me hope. So please, sir, keep fighting for me, because we're counting on you. We eventually got it done. Democrats, Republicans came together. We repealed the then policy called Don't Ask, Don't Tell. It was the right thing to do. I may have lost my next re-election, and that's okay, because Judgment Day is more important than Election Day. But that's the beauty of political public service. You can make a difference in people's lives that you otherwise might not even meet. And so that's why I'm so passionate about, making every day count, getting more veterans, whether they're Democrat or Republican, independent, involved in political public service, whether as a candidate or just voting. And that's why we need to unite as Americans, to see the humanity in each other and say, what are we doing in our own communities, for our own country, to do what's right, to move the ball forward, to make our great nation a more perfect union, as was laid out in the preamble of our Constitution, the blueprint of our country.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's difficult, very meaningful, but these are the stories we need to hear.
Yeah.
And for you to come on here and relay that is just remarkable, and it should be moving to everyone who hears it, and to, come out of that with, a certain message. So it is. Thank you so much. And this has been truly a pleasure, having this time with you on our podcast, exploring different ways and ideas and solutions, and telling these stories again and encouraging other people to do the same. And we also encourage other organizations to join us, join us in our grassroots programs and services that all that we've discussed. So the problems are many, but we have also great people like you out there who have the solutions and who want to unite us again and keep us moving forward, keep the country moving forward to greater days ahead of us.
Yeah.
So again, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us on our podcast, Beyond the Battlefield. And that's what it is, truly. We are beyond the battlefield. And so we hope so much to hear from you much more in the future. We hope so, right?
Yeah, John, so let me know how you're helpful. When this comes out, I'll make sure I share it on my social media, my LinkedIn, Patrick J. Murphy, my Instagram, Twitter, etc., which is at Patrick Murphy PA. Also Facebook, Patrick J. Murphy. But I appreciate you, my brother. Thank you for all that you do. And keep up the fight, man. You're making a difference. So thank you, John. Thanks for what you do, not just with this podcast, but with your incredible nonprofit and all that you do. And thank you for living what the Bible says, living with a servant's heart.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you again, sir. Thank you. I know.
That's it for this episode of Beyond the Battlefield. We're deeply grateful to Undersecretary of the Army Patrick J. Murphy for joining us today, not just to share his insights, but to speak directly to the hearts of all Americans. His words remind us that service doesn't end when the uniform comes off. It evolves, it inspires, and it continues to shape our nation. Until next time, stay engaged, stay grateful, and never stop fighting for those who fought for us.